Can you really take people at their word? Is a promise a comfort to a fool, or can we trust when someone says, I promise to do something, especially in the context of a budding relationship? Can you take the man at his word? Can you take the promises that he has made? Should you take them seriously? And especially if you have been burnt in relationships before and somebody is now making a promise and you are risking loving again, what should be your approach? And can you really trust that the man will do what he says he's going to do? That's what we're going to tackle this week as we look at Ruth chapter 4. But we're going to pick up from Ruth chapter 3. And this is week 6 in our book study of Ruth. It is Transformation Thursday, where we look at certain books that have transformed my life, and we eke out principles that will change the way we think and also change the way we live. And we've been living in the book of Ruth for a while, and we're going to continue that at least for another 2 weeks. So this week, we're focusing on a promise kept, and this is a promise spoken to Ruth by Boaz, and I will bring that up. Next week, we're going to look at from bitter to better. We're going to look at Naomi's joy and hope restored, and how that unfolded. So we're going to look at Naomi next week. This week, we're looking at Ruth again, and then after that, we are going to be looking at the gospel roots in Ruth. I was watching a series on that, a Bible study, and I found it very interesting. But I also told you from the beginning that there are Christological themes in the book of Ruth, because Jesus said all the scriptures speak about him. So we are going to address that. And finally, we're going to close out the series by looking at the book publishing principles and tips from the book of Ruth, and why I love the book of Ruth and how that informs publishing and how we can inform your publishing, your writing and publishing endeavors, and help authors to win. Because this whole channel is book-centered, it's geared towards author empowerment, and it's geared towards transformation and helping you to build a business around books, gain financial freedom, leave a legacy. And books are a platform for me for ministry as well as business. And so you're going to get both when you come on this channel. All right, so let's get into it. This week, we're looking at a promise kept. And we're going to back up to Ruth chapter 3. And I'm going to be reading from the Voice translation. And you're seeing that my name is on it, Ruth's Triple Treasure Celebration. Now, in chapter 3, we see Ruth proposing to Boaz based on a recommendation from Naomi. So Boaz has been observing Ruth for a while, and Naomi has been observing how Boaz has been treating Ruth. And so she told Ruth to let him know of her intention, since according to the law, when a family is poor, and I'm going to read a little commentary from the Voice on that, and in that family, if there are no children produced from a particular union, then a close relative, a kin, would be by law obligated to marry the widow of the deceased if there's no children. So you see there, God shut up Ruth's womb for 10 years because she needed to be part of the lineage of the Messiah and the lineage of David. But I won't get too much into that. We're going to save that for 2 weeks from now when we look at the gospel roots in Ruth. So it was his duty to marry to ensure that whatever inheritance and everything that they had would be kept in the family. And it was his responsibility legally to provide and to protect this family. And so here we find Boaz is functioning the role of what we call a Goel, a kinsman redeemer. But there is a problem. Boaz is not the next in line. He is second in line. But when Ruth makes a proposal, here's where the promise comes out. In chapter 3, verse 11, he says to her, and I'm going to read verse 11 straight to verse 13. He says, spend the rest of the night here. In the morning, I will give him a chance to act as your kinsman redeemer and redeem your family. So he's telling Ruth that we have an obstacle. I would love to do this, but there's somebody in the way and I need to talk to him. And then he says to Ruth, if he is willing to do this, good. But if he's not willing to fulfill his responsibility, then as the Eternal One lives, I promise I will redeem your family by marrying you. Mighty God. Ruth took a gamble. And here Boaz is saying, listen, we have an obstacle now, but to see if this man doesn't want you, I want you. No, that is big. I promise to marry you. And he says, remain here till morning. And of course, she gets up early. He gives her some barley to take home. He wants to preserve her honor. He doesn't want anybody to know that a woman was there or that anything untoward took place. Then when she returned home with the 6 measures of barley grain, she reported everything that Boaz did and what happened, said and what happened that night to her mother-in-law. And he sent her home with stuff because he said, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Now, Naomi says to her, which is where we ended last week, no, you must wait, daughter. We must wait and see what happened. And then Naomi was so assured that everything was going to go right. Naomi has come full circle. I guess she had 2 sons and a husband, so she understands the ways of men. And Naomi says, be at peace. That man will not rest today until this is resolved. Now we're going to eke out some lessons about relationships from this chapter. And when you find Mr. Right, and this is where a lot of people live in Ruth. Now, I didn't want to come here first, but we have to come here. What lessons can we learn from relationships as it relates to Boaz's action towards Ruth, Ruth's action towards Boaz, and just how should we behave? Because Boaz here represents the ideal man and Ruth, the ideal woman. Now, from chapter 3, are we saying that women should propose to men? No, we're not saying that the Bible teaches that. There is what we find in scripture, that which is descriptive and that which is prescriptive. So it isn't a law. The Bible is just describing the story as it unfolded, and it turns out that it worked. So there's no command to say, go, this is the way it ought to be. All right. He who finds a wife finds a good thing. So you have that as well. But here it was a gamble. Naomi said, listen, we need to get a permanent home. It is my responsibility to look after you. So Naomi wanted to repay Ruth's kindness. And she said, it is my responsibility. In the Voice translation, at the start of chapter 3, she says, my child, is my responsibility to find a husband and a place of rest for you, a place where you will find rest and contentment. Now, our relationship with Mr. Right or Miss Right is supposed to be a place where you find rest and contentment. So if you're in the relationship and you're miserable, and especially like you're in the dating phase, that's a red flag, because what you want is a place of rest and contentment, not something that is causing you undue stress and so forth. That's not the person to settle down with. That is what I believe we are being taught here. And now we're going to see, when a person is serious about you, how does he act? All right. So even though Ruth made the first move, this is key. Ruth made the first move, but Boaz took responsibility and he took it from there. So even if you dare like Ruth to make the first move and to make your interest known, you need to see if the man is serious, he is going to take it from there. That's what I'm picking up from this. What are you getting from it? And so let's look at his action. Because Boaz has had many months to observe Ruth, and he's been very kind to her. So he's fallen in love with her. She's of good character. He's also of good character, and he has the means. That's why he's the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, because Ruth and Naomi are not in a position to help themselves. And so just as Naomi said, wait, my daughter, the man is not going to rest today until he has resolved it. The one who is serious about you will make the sacrifice, will make you the priority, will do what it takes. You don't have to be guessing if he's interested. His intention should be clear. And I hope I'm talking to myself, right? As one who's made mistakes in this area before, learn from Boaz how a man behaves when he's serious about a woman. Even if there's an obstacle, he says, listen, I'm going to do the best I can. And he was willing to let Ruth go. He said, if this man is going to redeem you, fine. But if not, I will marry you. So sometimes, you have to be willing. But I said, let the bird go and let it find its way back to you. Maybe that's a point. I don't know. We're just sharing from the text, right? So according to the voice, the commentary here, if ever a landowner needs to lease out his land for money, then his close relative, called the kinsman redeemer, is supposed to buy the land back for his relative. So, Elimelech has land. That's Naomi's deceased husband. And so this is what is happening. The same is true if a man has to sell his family members into indentured servitude, because the condition was such that Ruth and Naomi, they're in dire poverty. Ruth is a stranger. She's from a cursed nation, a nation that is at war with Israel. In fact, fun fact, it was a prophet from Moab who was hired to curse Israel as they were on their way to the promised land. So that even, and his name is Balaam, right? So that even adds more to the hostility. This is like Israel and Iran, the relationship between Moab and Israel, right? So Ruth going over there, it's not good. So we're just seeing God working miracles and looking out for the outcasts, and we'll pick up more on that in terms of gospel truths. So the kinsman redeemer is to buy back the slave. The system reflects God's relationship with Israel. God continually saves his people from subservience to other nations. Since both Naomi and Ruth are widows without male sons, they are left in poverty. Naomi will have to lease out her husband's land to support them, and she may eventually have to sell herself and Ruth just to stay fed. By redeeming Elimelech's land, marrying Ruth, and eventually giving her a son, Boaz keeps the family intact as it would have had Elimelech or his son survived. All right, so what does Boaz do? Boaz is very smart. So he goes to the city gate and he sits down, and then it says, just then, the kinsman redeemer of the family, whom he had told Ruth about, walked by. And then he engages him in conversation. He says, my friend, come and sit down with me for a while. We have some business to discuss. So Boaz is making this thing happen. And so he uses his wisdom and intellect, and he knows, this man would want more land. And so he mentions the land first, and that Naomi is selling this property. Since he's first in line, would he want to buy it? And the man, his family member said yes. But then he says, okay, that's fine, you can have it. But understand too that when you buy this property, you also have to marry Ruth, the Moabitess, and you'll have to raise up children in the name of her deceased husband to carry on everything. And the man says, no. If I do that, I'm going to put my own inheritance in jeopardy with his family. So this was the law of the land. You may not agree with it. This is just how it was. And so Boaz just slips that into the conversation after, and the man says, And we're just looking at verses 1 to 10 today. And he says, no, I can't do that. And so what Boaz had done was he was doing things proper. So the person who is truly interested in you and looking out for your welfare is not going to hide and keep, those hidden secret relationship and make promises to you in secret. It was a promise made in secret, but Boaz is ensuring he's a man of integrity that he's going to keep it. And so he gathers the elders at the gate to ensure that the deal goes through legally. And back then, they exchange shoes and that kind of thing to indicate the sale. And so we see Boaz makes every effort to keep his word. Are there still men around like Boaz who will not just tell you things in secret and then in public do something else? Are there still trustworthy men? I like what he said to Ruth. Take it easy. You may rest easy. You have nothing to fear, my child. I will do everything you ask. Because everyone knows you are a woman of virtuous character. Fun fact, I like to give you a fun fact, right? The word used in terms of being virtuous in Ruth is only used 3 times in scripture. It's used in Proverbs 31 2 times, and it's used here the first time. And guess who wrote? It is said that it's perhaps Solomon who wrote Proverbs 31. And Solomon is the great, great, great grandson of Ruth. And no doubt when he was talking about a virtuous woman, or maybe he was reflecting on his great, great grandmother, Ruth, who was also described as a virtuous woman from a quote unquote, a cursed nation, and a people who had spurious background, scandalous background. You see, we have to be careful how we judge people. Though she is from a line that is like that, she is different. She is considered to be a virtuous woman. And so things can change. You don't have to continue the patterns of your family. You can be the difference maker. You can be the cycle breaker. So Ruth was a cycle breaker. And Boaz also understood this, because fun fact, in Jewish culture, it is only when you're considered Jewish if your mother is Jewish. So there's a thing that's saying that Boaz isn't really Jewish, fully Jewish, because Boaz's mother was Rahab, a Canaanite, right, from Jericho, who was engrafted into Israel because of her faith in the God of Israel and how she saved the spy. And not only that, Boaz's mom was a prostitute. So he understands the plight of the marginalized and the despised. And Boaz is a Christ type here. God understands the plight of the marginalized, the outcast, and the despised. And Boaz here is representing Christ here, that God has not forgotten the marginalized or the outcast. Your reputation is not too far gone for God to intervene and to help you. That you're not too wicked, you're not too bad, for God to redeem you, to love you. Those are the things that are coming out. He's the God of the outcast. He came not for the saved, but he came, or the righteous. Sorry, he came for sinners. And sometimes we forget that. And although I'm preempting, but Jesus was said to be a friend of sinners. And that was supposed to be an insult. But Jesus is a friend of sinners. And we as Christians, we have to watch our attitude, how we engage others who's, we want to be around people of nice reputation and all kind of stuff. But here Boaz is engaging and looking out for Ruth, who's a Moabitess, a person with a stained reputation from an accursed, quote unquote, an accursed country. But he's looking out for her as a stranger in his land. And that is the heart of God. God cares for the outcast. God cares for those on the margin. And so we too must look out for the widows, the orphans, the prostitutes, the lepers. Because to be a Moabite in Israel was almost like a leper. Nobody would want to hire you. Nobody would want to engage with you. And here, you see the other family man says, no, I don't want to be a part of that. But Boaz is willing to take it on. You know, he provides margin in his business to take care of the poor. And so it is that we were in business, we must have margin and space so that we can look after those who are on the margins, those who don't have anybody, and look out for the refugees. Look out even for the prisoners, the prostitutes. No, we say this, but I believe this can only be done by the grace of God. And so we need to pray for that grace, because grace is all over Ruth, the book of Ruth. That God will give us that heart, that heart like Boaz, to care for the less fortunate, to look beyond the faults of people and to see their heart and to lend a helping hand. Those are some of the things that are coming out. But in terms of relationships, the man who is serious about you is going to make you his priority, and he's going to do what it takes. He's not going to be playing games with you. And far too many, even in Christendom, far too many play games, you know, and play with your emotions and make promises that they can't keep or don't intend to keep. Boaz intended to keep his promise. He observed her. He fell in love with her. He was looking out for her, and the right one will do that. So we end here in verse 10 of chapter 4. He says to the elders, every one of you witness here what happened today. I have secured the rights to everything that belonged to Elimelech and his sons, Mahlon and Chilion, from Naomi. I have also taken responsibility for Ruth, the woman from Moab who was married to Mahlon. And this is interesting that this woman has nothing. You know, sometimes we think, especially when you get to a certain age, you have to come to the table with all kind of things. Are there still men like Boaz? Ruth was supposed to be considered damaged goods. She was married before. She, supposed to touch her. She's from a different culture, a culture that is hated by your people. And yet he goes to bat. This is true love. And it typifies God, because it says, while we are yet enemies, Christ died for us. Remember, sin separates us from God. The gospel in Ruth, sin separates us from God. And so a holy God cannot tolerate sin. And so he became like one of us so that he could rescue us. So Boaz to the rescue. And he said, I will see to it that his family and city, I will see to it that his family and this city remembers Mahlon. I will raise children who will bear his name and make sure his property stays in the family. You're all witnesses of this today. The one who loves you, who is serious about you, will see you as his responsibility. I remember talking recently to somebody, and he said, what he's living for is he wants to ensure that if anything happens to him, his wife and his son are taken care of. And that's a Jamaican man, because so many things have been said about Jamaican men, but so many things have been said about Moabites, but Ruth was different. And Boaz is different. This is a time when everybody did what they felt was right in their own eyes. This is a time, at a lawless time, these people are living virtuous lives. So at a time when it seems as if all hell is breaking loose or there is no hope, these two represent hope. At a time where maybe as a Christian, people around you, they are not living right. Maybe the other pastors are not living right. Things are not going well. You've been surrounded by a lot of hypocrites. You've seen a lot of bad stuff, but they are still people of God. They're still true people. We ask the question, are any good men left? I believe, because that which was written for our learning, even in the midst of chaos, even in the midst of hopelessness, that there are still good men out there. There are still some Boaz-like men out there. There are still some Ruth-like women out there. Not everybody is sleeping around. Not everybody, because they go to your home or you're alone with them, they're going to take advantage of you. Not that everybody is going to play with your feeling. Not every man out there is a gallus or playing the field or is a womanizer. I believe the story of Boaz here is a reminder that there are still good men around, even in a time of lawlessness, even in a time where there's a lot of promiscuity, and in a time where it seems as if you cannot trust men, even at a time where it seems as if all the good men are gone. No, the story of Boaz is a reminder that, yeah, even, and it's speaking to me because of the things that I've experienced in relationship. You do wonder, are good men still around? I have had promises broken to me. You know, I should have been married 2 times now, right? And you wonder when you've been rejected, or you wonder when a promise is broken. You know, I'm being vulnerable on this episode. Are there those who will keep their promises? I remember one of my mentors said to me that boys are great talkers, but real men commit. And Boaz is a real man. Forget the name, you in Jamaican, just look at the setting here. He's a real man, and he keeps his promise. Next week, we're going to pick up at the wedding and the blessings that are said at the wedding, and all the things that was prophesied over them and how it ended. And we're going to focus on Naomi and how God turned bitter into better. So it's becoming better for Ruth, and it will be better for Naomi as well. I did a little PowerPoint, so I'm going to bring that up and just share a couple points. Just some takeaways from this, and then look at. If you've been blessed by this teaching, let me know. I want to shout out Jacqueline and Delphine and who else? I think Pat Fletcher also commented on the episodes. They've been enjoying it. So thank you so much for commenting and emailing me and telling me how this series, or messaging me and telling me how this series has been a blessing to you. So what was the promise? Rest easy. You know, you want to be in a relationship where you can trust. You know, you have nothing to fear. Fear shouldn't be the dominant thing in your relationship. He says, I will do everything you ask. As surely as the Lord lives, I promise you, I will redeem your family by marrying you. And so lessons from Ruth chapter 4, we're learning, you know, in terms of a promise kept, that we can trust God to take care of us and to keep his promises. The scriptures, I don't remember where it is now, but the promises of God are yea and amen. So God is a promise keeper, and Boaz typifies God. Remember, God is a promise keeper. And God can still make the barren fruitful. Well, I jump a little bit ahead here because Boaz is saying, I will raise up children. No, this is a statement of faith, you know, because for 10 years, Ruth was married and had no children. So this is a statement of faith that he believes that God will open her womb. And we're going to see if that really happens next week. Well, we know because you read the whole book, and Ruth is the great-grandmother. She can't be a great-grandmother of David if God didn't open her womb. But this is a statement of faith from Boaz. You know, even though she was without children for 10 years, he's saying that I will raise up children. So it's a statement of faith. And it's a statement to us that God can make the barren fruitful. And maybe that's a word for somebody today. Boaz's efforts, he typifies God's heart and his actions towards the one he loves. And so God goes out of his way to rescue humanity. He didn't have to, but he has done that through Christ. So God identifies with those on the margins. And so should we. A lot of us, we only want to associate with famous people or people from uptown. And as a church representative of Christ, we have to be careful about that. So some of us don't want to mix with those in the inner city. We don't want to mix with certain kinds. No, you do need wisdom, you know, but in terms of reaching out and helping, Boaz is reaching out to help, to empower, to provide, to protect, to elevate. Let's look out for those on the margin. Let's speak out for those who can't speak for themselves. Let's help those who can't help themselves. And help those who are trying. because Ruth was trying. She wasn't looking for handout. She was taking steps in the right direction. And one of the things in terms of God's provision, because the whole story is about provision. It begins with a famine, and that's what caused the problem. So there's a lack of provision. Provision doesn't just drop from sky. God provides through people. And so you need to ask yourself, what resources has God given me, and how can I use these resources to help those who cannot help themselves? How can I use it to help the poor and those who are in need? And in terms of relationship lessons, you heard me say, the man who loves you will make you, that should be H-I-S, I have I-S, will make you his priority, all right? So that slide need to be corrected. And the man who knows, you know, Boaz didn't take long to figure out that Ruth was his. I know some people are in relationship 2, 3, 4 years and they still can't make up their mind. I don't believe those men really know. And I believe, like my friend Jenna, who wrote Ring Ready, after a year or so, the man must know. You know, he will know. And don't play with people's emotions. If you can't make up your mind, especially when you get to a certain age, after a year or two, about this person, then release the person to go find somebody else. Now, that's controversial, but that's what Jenna says, and I'm agreeing with her. Boaz knew, and it didn't take him forever to make up his mind. And when he was convinced, when he became serious, he sought to make things happen. He wasn't just stringing her along. So when a man is serious, I believe, like Boaz, when a man is serious about you, he will do what it takes. So I am taking these lessons to heart. And the next time, you know, somebody comes along, he has to pass the Boaz test. Will he be a keeper of his word or not? So I trust that you found this helpful. I look forward to the comments. Remember, next week, we're going to look at from bitter to better, the turnaround for Naomi's joy, and how that is wrapped up in this union. And then after that, we're going to look at the gospel roots in Ruth. And finally, we are going to be looking at publishing tips, you know, lessons we can learn from Ruth for author success. And we've been looking at life success in general. We're going to look at lessons from the book of Ruth for author success to end the series in about 2-3 weeks. So this is a 9-part series. All right. Remember, don't just listen to the teaching. We need to live out our learning. And ta for now until next time.